We would struggle until about July to get medical students, into the Navy. And last year, I think around June, July, we pretty much were done. And I should say we were into September sometimes. Last year we were in June, July, yes.
Is there a certain score on the MCATs or the dental tests that you take?
No.
Exclusively?
I'll tell you, you don't even have to have a letter of acceptance to apply for my program, okay, for that, I won't say mine, but for the program. Once you have your MCAT results and your GPA is 3 or better, you can do the application. We can't final select you until you have a letter of acceptance from a school. And I'll tell you, if a school is saying yes to you, the Navy, the Army, and the Air Force is going to say yes to you. Unless there's something wrong with you, you're going to get offered a scholarship, okay? Now, there's only 245 slots a year for medical, okay? So you would think it would be easy to fill up, and it's getting easier, but there's a very small percentage of the United States that can come into the military. The number one reason why someone can't come in is physical. You're on ADHD medication, you have asthma, you've got retained hardware from a real bad fracture, etc., okay? So, if you have medical issues, you may or may not be eligible. We have a manual that talks about what's a waiverable condition, what's a disqualifying condition. A lot of folks, when you're 4, 5, 6 years old, you have asthma, but as you become a teenager and a young adult, you grow out of it. In your record, it's going one of the first, not one of the first question they ask is, have you ever used an inhaler, or do you have asthma? Have you now or ever had? And if you say yes, you have to get medical documentation to show what it was about. And I've probably put in half a dozen people that had used an inhaler in the past, and what they did was they went and got a spirometry, a pre and post bronchodilator spirometry, to make sure that their pulmonary function was normal. And all of them had normal pulmonary function, so they waived them. Because I'm not putting in fighter pilots, I'm putting in medical professionals. So there's the standard's a little bit lower with regard to certain medical problems, because you're going to be wielding a scalpel or whatever, you're not wielding an M16. So there's a little bit more tolerance for stuff. So, but that's why I tell people, do it early and then walk away if you decide you don't want to. That way at least you have a slot held for you, waiting for your letter of acceptance. Because right now, go ahead.
What about, I was considering taking the MCAT in the fall, studying in the summer, because I just don't know how much I'd be able to study in the spring semester with my course load, and you were saying most people that are trying to get on the ball for the scholarship will have everything submitted by June or July. Now,
I may have misspoken. I mean, you can start doing it then,
yeah.
Okay, but, and I think they start with July is when they actually start accepting your applications at the schools.
1st of June, the MCAS goes out.
Right.
So probably by the middle of June, you can start actually submitting a completed application.
And meaning that you can, if the earlier you get your stuff in, you have the opportunity to do earlier interviews and things like that. Because I'm already starting to get people, hey, I have my letter from NUSC, I have my letter from whatever that school or the DO school in Virginia is. So, and we're only in November. Okay, the thing is, you have to make sure you take your test, because I think September is the last time they give it until January. So you don't want to wait too far into the fall to do it. And I just say earlier is better, because if you're prepared, that's the qualifying statement. If you're not ready to do it, then don't do it just to meet a a deadline I'm throwing out there. But if you feel comfortable, and I don't know, doesn't Kaplan do like practice tests or whatever? I don't know what they cost, but I've heard of some places you can do free practice tests.
We offer we offer a practice Kaplan MCAT and DAT in the fall and in the spring. So twice a year Kaplan comes in through AED, we offer free practice tests.
If you don't do that, Professor Smith needs to smack you upside the head. I'm serious. If it's free, do it. Free is a good thing, because it's going to tell you what you have issues with. And you're allowed to take it more than once as well. You all know that, the DAD, MCAT, PCAT. But I just think that the sooner you can get it in there, that way you get the early look. Maybe you get lucky and you get to tell medical schools no, because you get to pick from which one you want. So, what other questions y'all have? Yeah.
Are there any programs in the Navy for undergrads?
Such as,
Such as like I know there's a program where they pay for school and then you go to OCS after graduation. Is there a way that you can?
you're talking, there's a thing called the Baccalaureate Degree Completion Plan, our program. I honestly don't do a lot of that because I concentrate on medical, but that's more for line, what we call line or unrestricted line, pilots, ship drivers, things like that.
Is there any way for you to go from that program into the medical field?
No. If you do BCD, it's BDCP is what it's called. If you do that, you have to go do your Navy commitment for 4 years, then you can apply to go into another program. There's an ROTC instructor at USC that's a pilot that's getting ready, or not a pilot, naval flight officer that's getting out of the Navy, who's applying for med school and is going to have the Navy pay for it. So, I mean, there's different ways to slay the dragon, but as far as undergrad, we don't. We're on the medical side, it's all graduate stuff. Somebody else had a question?
I just want to ask, and this may not be something you can answer, I'm not sure. What's kind of the difference in experience, I suppose, as far as going through the health services or the scholarship here versus going through like the Armed Services Med School in Bethesda?
Oh, USIS. Okay, the Uniformed Services Health. Basically, it's the health college, whatever. Well, I'll tell you that their process is a little bit more rigorous, and they're a lot more selective. The way we do this, okay, there's a very set timeline to do their submissions, and they look at everybody at once. The Navy does every 2 weeks. We do a board for HPSP. The Army and the Air Force, I think they do it monthly or quarterly or something like that. So what we do is we do it rolling. So there's an advantage to ours as far as, you can get, if you're qualified and you put your paperwork in, you may have, let's say, a 3.3 and a 25 MCAT. You're not necessarily going to be held until we get enough packages in, and then you got to deal with a 3.9 and a 35 MCAT. See what I'm saying? That program, they lump everybody together so they can really start picking the lip, get the pick of the litter. So it's not to say you shouldn't try that if that's something you're interested in. I'm just saying that that's the biggest difference. And that's why we're a little bit different than the Army and the Air Force, is we don't stack everybody up and then have one board. We want to make our goal and know what we're bringing in early rather than scrambling and not making our goal. But one thing I'll tell you as far as myself, if you decide you're going to do something with me and work with me, I'm not going to, customer service is like my priority. I'm not going to toot my own horn, but I'm putting 2 people from the Air Force into the Navy because the recruiter, and I'm sort of breaking my rule about not dogging somebody out, but bad customer service. If you decide you want to work with the Army or the Air Force, make the recruiter work for you. Okay, that's what we get paid for. That's what our job is. You shouldn't wait weeks to get a reply. If you wait a couple of days because maybe it's a weekend or something, that's acceptable. But do not let a recruiter not get back to you and take care of your business, because it's thousands and thousands of dollars that you guys could be saving over the course of your lives if you're going to do this. What else? Yeah.
Could you describe, I know you're not going to bash the Army or the Air Force, but just describe one of the biggest differences being in the Navy versus the other.
Well, the first biggest difference, what they say in real estate? Location, location, location. I will tell you that I would rather be on the coasts as opposed to Minot, North Dakota, which is an Air Force base, or off at Nebraska. But by the same token, the Air Force has a base in McCord, Washington State, which is outside of Seattle. They have Travis Air Force Base in California. But we tend to be more on the coasts. But I like our choice of duty stations. I like our choice of overseas locations. I tell people, the Army says if you go into the Navy, you have to go on a ship, or the Air Force says, oh, you got to go on a ship. Well, I say, if you're lucky enough, you get to go on a ship. And like I said, I only got to do 2 of 27 years, and I was in 13 before I got to go to my first one. I was screaming. I wish I was 18 when I got to do it. But so location is one. The variety of what we get to do. Here's the bottom line. The Air Force don't have ships, and the Army don't have ships. Okay? The Navy has ships, and we have airplanes. And oh, by the way, them guys with the guns, we got them too. It's called Marines. So we can do everything that any other service can do. They can't do everything we can do. So our variety is different. They don't have diving medical officers. They don't have the opportunity to go onto a ship. These ships right here, the Mercy and the Comfort, the two big white ships, when we do a humanitarian mission, we put about 700 medical people on it, between corpsmen, nurses, physician attendants, whatever. The Army kind of kicks in about 30, and the Air Force kicks in maybe a half a dozen or two. And then the Public Health Service sends in a few people. So we get to do better, I think better and more, neat humanitarian missions. We did Katrina when it happened with one of these ships. We went to the tsunami location in Indonesia in 2004, I think it was. They did a 3-month tour of Central America this summer. They did a 4-month tour of the Far East in 2009. They did Vietnam, the Philippines, Indonesia, and New Guinea. So the opportunities we have are a little bit different. Overseas, we have Japan, Guam, Spain, Italy, Sicily, Bahrain, which is in the Middle East, Korea, and some of those are the same as the Army as far as overseas things. So, but I'll tell you that I have no Army providers that used to be in the Navy and will say that they like the attitude in the Navy better. I mean, the Army is hoorah, they're ready to go lock and load and shoot and kill and everything. That's their mission, okay? Their attitude's a little bit different than ours. I know firsthand, I took over from the Army in Cuba with the detainees. So our lifestyles are a little bit more laid back maybe. The Air Force is even more laid back than us, okay? And I will pick at them, so if they get to see this, say love. But I call the Air Force the biggest branch of uniformed civilians in the Department of Defense. But no, it's all about your attitude, about where you're going, what you're doing. But all three offer the same benefits, retirement-wise, education-wise, and something to think about. This is across the board as well. How many of y'all are going to be married someday down the road with kids? A bunch of you. That's good. Let's say that you do, your 8 years, you do your med school, you do your residency, you do your payback, and then you get out and you have kids at that point. The new GI Bill that we have now lets you transfer your education benefits to your spouse or to your kids. And basically it's the same as coming here for 4 years free. It pays basically wherever the state is you're going to school at, or your children or your wife would be, or husband would be going to school at, they look at the highest cost public school in the state, and that's what they will pay 4 years worth of. Basically 9 months, 9 months, 9 months, and 9 months. That's how I'm going to nursing school in about 2.5 years from now. But you can transfer that to your family. So whether it's your spouse or whether it's your kids. And the way to do it, because I'm going to actually transfer part of mine to my wife, I'm going to sign her up for 1 month's worth. That way she's in the system. And if she ever decides she wants to do it, then we can transfer more over. And that's how you would do it with your family. You'd put, little Timmy in there for a month. And then if you get a little Maggie afterwards, or maybe they both get 24 months of your stuff. I don't know. But so that's a huge benefit. So that way they don't have to worry about having lottery scholarships or whatever other scholarships are out there. It could be dad or mom scholarship. Any other questions? Yes.
If you want to go on those humanitarian missions, can you pretty much go if you want to?
Yes and no. Here's how it works. The United States is split into an east and a west region. Okay, one ship is on the west coast, one ship's on the east coast. What they do is they usually project humanitarian missions out. They know where they want to go, they know what they want to do. Now, if you have an earthquake or a tsunami or a hurricane, that kind of skews the schedule. But what they do is they say, okay, east region, here's all the medical facilities, whether it's a clinic or a hospital. The Bethesda Naval Hospital provides a lot of the East Coast assets because that's where the ship's at. That's a huge hospital. But what they may do is say, you know what, we need a family practice stock in Jacksonville, Florida's Naval Hospital. You guys are on the hook for it. And they'll say, does anybody want to do it? And if no one wants to, they can go back to the region and say, well, is there anybody in the region that wants to step up to do this? Because most people